today is Luke 1 through 13. Then Jesus said to the disciples, "There was a rich man who had a manager, and charges were brought to him that this man had squandered his property. So he summoned him and said to him, 'What is this that I hear about you? Give me an accounting of your management, because you cannot be my manager any longer.' Then the manager said to himself, 'What will I do? Now that the manager is taking the position away from me, I am not strong enough to dig, and I am ashamed to beg. I have decided what to do so that when I am dismissed as a manager, people may welcome me into their homes.' So summoning the master's debtors one by one, he asked the first, 'How much do you owe my master?' He answered, 100 jugs of olive oil. He said to him, 'Take your bill and sit down quickly and make it 50. Then he asked another, 'And how much do you owe?' He replied, 100 containers of wheat. He said to him, 'Take your bill and make it 80. And the master commended the dishonest manager because he had acted shrewdly. For the children of this age are more shrewd in dealing with their own generation than are the children of light. And I tell you, make friends for yourself by means of dishonest wealth, so that when it is gone, they may welcome you into the eternal homes. Whoever is faithful in a very little is faithful also in much, and whoever is dishonest in a very little is also dishonest in much. If then you have not been faithful with the dishonest wealth, who will trust you with true riches? And if you have not been faithful with what belongs to another, who will give you what is your own? No slave can serve two masters, for a slave will either hate the one and love the other, or be devoted to the one and despise the other. You cannot serve God and money."
These passages is one of the most complicated or complex passages in the New Testament. There is a plenty of interpretations of these passages. And obviously this interpretation is coming with different theologies or different points of view of the Bible. So for one moment, I was tempted to say, no, I will change the scripture for today. I don't want to talk about this because it's very complicated. So it takes time to understand. So hopefully today we could understand this interpretation. In this parable, the master calls bad manager and tells the story of a manager who is accused of lavishing or wasting his master's assets. In Jesus' time, it was very common for landowners to live abroad and to leave the administration of their property in the hands of stewards or local administrators. As Jesus will ask him, as the master, will ask him to render accounts of his administration, and the millionaire was faced with the reality of losing his job. He proposed a plan to secure his future. Since he could not do manual labors, he not has any intention to make manual labors to dig in, because this could feel very embarrassment. The butler used a strategy to win the favor and support of his debtors. The two examples that of the debtor. These two examples, who owed 100 barrels of oil and the one who owed 100 measures of wheat, illustrate the strategy of the butler. The debt is reduced to both of them, from 100 barrels of oil to 50, and from 100 measures of wheat to 80. The administrator was not a paid employee, but saw his livelihood by administering the property of the master. This generally consisted of usury loans, which consisted of a receipt where the amount originally borrowed was increased either to other owners, to medium or small farmers. With this in mind, we can see that the point of this parable is not to praise fraudulent administrative practices or to encourage corruption, but to recognize that the administrator did justice. Wait, we don't finish yet. The new written receipts actually reflect the amounts that they were originally lent. It is possible that the debt reduction is equivalent to the personal gain of the butler. The earnings of the butler was sometimes very bigger, exorbitant, so that in this case he would have sacrificed his immediate personal gain to gain the favor of his debtors. In other words, the administrator renounced his compensation based on a whole system of unfair economic relations and practice. This has been done for fear or represalias from the master, or to ingratiate himself with the debtors. Is a secondary issue in this parable. The crux is that there is a renunciation of usual economic practices. The parable Jesus is an outline of the domination of God, with the effects of the irruption of a reality different from everyday life. In this parable, it is God breaking into reality to disrupting and transforming it from what are considered normal and even social acceptable practices to the authentic practice of justice. This parable is followed by a series of sayings of Jesus that interpreted the parable, highlighting various aspects relevant to the life of the disciples. The saying of Jesus in these verses can be subdivided in three main categories. In the first place, the exhortation to win friends through unjust wealth. Secondly, the comparison between the loyalty in the little and the much. And third, the statement about the impossibility of serving God and wealth all at the same time. The sayings about faithfulness in little and much, as well as the reference to faithfulness in the administration of other people's things, serve to illustrate the importance of an adequate scale of values and in line with the values of the kingdom. The administration of finance must be at the service of the common good, especially with a view to justice for the poor and weak in society. Only by sharing and distributing with justice does the true sense of faithfulness to God be revealed. At the end of the narration, Jesus makes observations that seem contradictory, and this has historically contributed with the difficulty of interpreting the text. However, right there he makes a warning that we should not ignore. No servant can serve two masters, because he will hate one and love the other, or esteem one and belittle the other. You cannot serve God and wealth. In the verse that closed the narration, Jesus goes directly to the Pharisees, who listened to him mockingly and admonished them. You are the one who justified yourself before men, but God knows your hearts. For what men have been sublime, before God it is an abomination. Jesus' words warn about the problem of goods and wealth, injustice, and the conflict of loyalties between God and unjust or dishonestly obtaining goods of riches. Probably you know this quote. I don't know. 3 rings for the elven kings under the sky, 7 for the dwarf lords in their house of stone, 9 for mortal men doomed to die, 1 for the dark lord in his dark throne, in the land of Mordor where the shadows lie, 1 ring to rule them all, 1 ring to find them, 1 ring to bring them all, and in the darkness bind them, in the land of Mordor where the shadows lie. It's from the book of the Lord of the Rings by J.R.R. Tolkien. This book presents the dilemma of the character Frodo. You read the books or you watch the movies? All the movies is about Frodo. What happened with Frodo? Who had the mission of destroying a ring that promises power to those who own it. However, the reality was that whoever put on the ring did not become the Lord of the Ring, but that the ring took possession of the person. Wait a little bit. During the journey of Frodo, we can see the internal struggle that exists between what he wants and between what is this right. This is the dilemma of all the movies. Frodo, meanwhile he is near to the ring controls him. And with the time becoming to desfigure his character and his person. An example of this is the other character, the other important person in the book, who is called first Smeagol. Smeagol, he was also a hobbit. And Smeagol, when he found the ring, he accepted the possession of the ring. With the time, even Smeagol not just lost her personality, even he lost her own name. Because now it's not anymore Smeagol. With the time, it's gone. So, we can see in this example of the Lord of the Rings how they looking for the power, looking to obtain more. With the time, we can lose everything, even our own self. Our passage begins referring to a domestic or a slave servant and the act of serving. Since a slave is subject to the will and control of his master, he cannot serve two masters. This social and institutional reality is now related to the issue of riches that accumulate obsessively in pursuit of one's own existence and security. This designates a demonic reality, a reality opposed to God, because it is the result of a dishonest and unjust possession. This deprives others of their livelihoods, thus denying the reality of love. Moreover, it makes us a slave that we no longer have our own will, but instead become governed by the logic and dynamics that govern the possessions. God, the true Lord, represents an exact opposite logic. Therefore, God and money cannot be served. It is dynamism and projects are antagonistic. Certainly, Jesus was an economist. Nor does he give us a recipe on how to structure and organize our society. But his parables present us with the reality of a God who manifests as a radical questioning of the economic, social, and institutional practices that dehumanize and enslave us. Jesus doesn't tell us that God is like the master of the parable, or even less like the unfaithful administrator. God is not the subject here, but God is what happens when there is a renunciation of serving the ego. Itself rises to the detriment of the needs of others. God is another level of reality that emerges in our midst, creating a crisis and opening a promise. Martin Luther said, "Trust and faith of the heart can do the same to God as to the idol. Where our hearts are, there is our God." The reality that determines everything. That is why the question about God is also a question about ourselves. From whom do we expect all the goods of life? What do we trust in the midst of our needs? The question about God is thus an X-ray of our own life. Money and goods are not simply neutral objects, but they are the visible expression of social relationship that also indicate where our heart is. When this reality make up a system that survives at the expenses of others, of the potentialities and opportunities for life. That is, in a system that demands sacrifice, we are faced with what the gospel calls mammon. This God is certainly very subtle, contrary to the God of life, who illuminates us and opens our eyes. Mammon, all the wellness, all the riches, add us to blindness. It covers our eyes. Mammon, or the ring in the Lord of the Rings, rise when we stop seeing misery as a problem, when poverty is considered an inescapable destiny, when the suffering of others is a cause of our well-being. In sum, Mammon rejoices and the widening gap between rich and poor, legal and illegal, north and south. But our God, the God of Jesus, is the indication that another world is possible. Contrary to appearance, this is the real world, because it's the eternal world, the word of God. Contrary to Mammon, are full and shrewd. I don't thank you, Ali. This God divides us in two in order to enter into our deepest desires and motivations. He asks us, do our minds and our hearts have the form of Christ? What kind of trust guides and shapes our lives? The big question is, are we a slave or are we free? Amen. And praise to God for the technology, because to God was hard to me. I'm sorry.